All right, so we're going to give this just a few more minutes, try to get some people in here, and then we'll get started on everything. If you want, you can type in the comments where you're logging in from and how is your day going. Here, it's about 72 degrees out here where I'm at. I'm in Waynesville, Ohio. I'm actually at the fire department because my internet's not the best at the house, so I want to make sure I give you guys a good internet connection. It's about 72. We just went under a thunderstorm watch, so we'll see how that goes. It's a little humid though, so pardon me. I've got Ember from Girl Scouts of Western Ohio in here. She's going to kind of moderate the chat for me. And hello, Rock Island, Illinois. Yeah, we've had a ton of rain too. The last couple of days have been nice, but I think we're about to get some more. Ooh, 93 degrees. That's crazy. I'm not ready for that. Anyway, Ember or Tori Hauk is going to moderate the chat for me. And towards the end of this, we'll have some questions that she'll send to me, and I'll try to answer questions as we can. We'll try to keep this to 45 minutes to an hour. Just depends how many questions you have, but we don't want to take all your day, but we'd like to get this information out for the badges. Central Texas, hello. Tennessee, hello. Hi, Dr. Morgan from Westfield, Massachusetts. Greater Atlanta, hello, hello, hello. All right, so throughout this, we'll go ahead and kind of get rolling on this. If for any reason someone does miss any of this, they can always go back and watch it later or rewind and catch back up as we go. So some of this is going to be you looking at my pretty face, and then some of this is I've got a PowerPoint that we'll just kind of go through and we'll talk through some talking points about these badges, and then I've got some visual aids. But because of everything going on, I really can't. I wanted to do show you guys some moving patients and stuff like that, but because of social distancing and whatnot, we're gonna kind of leave that alone for now, and then hopefully in the future you guys can take a class. So to get started, I'm going to share my screen so you can kind of look at the PowerPoint with me, and then Tori, if you'll text me just to make sure you guys can see this. We'll start this from the beginning. We'll give it a second just to make sure we can see this. So, I guess the badge that we're going to cover a little bit about today is the Wilderness First Aid. My name is Matthew Mumma. I'm a ranger for Girl Scouts of Western Ohio. We cover from Toledo to Cincinnati, and I am in the southwest side of Ohio, in Waynesville. And I'm also a firefighter paramedic for my local department. So we're going to go through this, and hopefully it's not too boring for you, but let's get started. So first things first, we'll just give out a little notice. This class does not offer any certification and is solely intended for general knowledge. If you are interested in more training on the subject matter, we recommend that you attend an in-person certification class. There's a lot of first aid classes out there, fire departments, American Heart Association, and there's quite a few other ones. So just going forward, these are all recommendations. This gives you no certification, but these are just kind of general guidelines, rules of thumb, and just some good knowledge to have. So the objectives we're going to try to meet is medical emergencies in the wilderness. Obviously, we can't cover everything, so we'll move through just some of the bigger things here, and then at the end, any questions you have, we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. We're going to touch on care for the critically injured. We're going to have a section for you to ask me questions, and then your homework, because who doesn't like homework? And I promise it's really not that bad. So the first things we're going to touch on is first aid kits and supplies. Anytime you go out into the wilderness or you go to a camp or a state park or wherever you may be traveling, it's always a good idea to have your own first aid kit. And I say that because if you have one, that means you can help someone else or yourself. So if everybody carries their own little first aid kit, we're doing good. So we'll just go over a few of the things, common things that you can find in first aid kits. Assorted adhesive bandages, and then after this I've got some supplies here I can kind of show you what I'm talking about when I say these things. Pardon me. Assorted gauze, triangular bandages, those have many great uses, and we'll kind of talk about those here in a minute. Scissors, you always need scissors. Tweezers, not a bad thing to have. Medical tape, you're going to need tape in your kit. Nitrile gloves. I say nitrile because there are people out there that still have allergies to latex. Nitrile is kind of like a hypoallergenic synthetic material. They're readily available, and it just kind of keeps everybody safe. Some sort of wound cleaning solution. That can be sterile water. That can be distilled water. Some people like hydrogen peroxide. It's really up to you. There's no wrong answer when it comes to that. So just choose what you want and carry what you need. Hand cleaner, because nothing's more important than washing your hands, especially at times like these. A thermometer. Thermometers are great to have. They're fairly inexpensive. Digital oral thermometers, probably like $3 or $4, maybe even cheaper on Amazon. But it's never a bad idea. And then the only thing you really have to maintain is batteries. And the kitchen sink. Everybody says, I put everything in there but the kitchen sink. You can literally make your first aid kit as simple or as complex as you want. There are a lot of commercial items out there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see me again, and then we'll go over some stuff. So the camera's not back yet. Anyway, so there are, that's why. There we go. You have to click stop sharing screen twice. So there are a lot of commercial kits available online. All of them have different things. It's really what you want to carry. We just recommend some basic things, but you can always add or take away as you see fit. And like I said, if everybody's carrying their own first aid kit, we could never see the screen, only you. Never saw the screen, we only have seen you. Oh, wow. Okay, well, we'll just skip past this whole screen sharing thing. So Curlex, this is Curlex. It's you can buy it at any first aid store, CVS, pharmacy, whatever. This happens to be a 4.5-inch Curlex, and I'll open these for you. I'm sure a lot of people know what they are, but for the ones that don't, we'll just kind of open some of these and go through and see what they are. I'm sorry if you hear the radio. So this is just a basically a 4x4 gauze, or the soft part of a Band-Aid. It's on a roll. These are great because they're a bulky dressing. They're very absorbent. And then you can roll them on like an ace bandage, cover a wound, put a piece of tape on it, and then go about your business. So these are rolled gauze, if you will. I'm not going to open this one because these are kind of pricey if you start opening a whole bunch. This is like the medical sports stuff. It's really elastic, almost like an ace bandage in cool colors. These aren't good for, it's called Coban if you want the official name. And this is a 3M product, obviously. So this is great to, once you have put a Band-Aid on, or a rolled gauze, or a 4x4, this is what kind of holds everything in place. These are also good for minor sprains and stuff. There's not a lot of rigidity to them, so they're not going to hold shape, but they'll hold everything together. Triangular bandages. I love these things. There's a million uses for them. You can use them to sling and swath a shoulder injury. You can use them for splinting. They usually come with either paper, or not paper clips, the little pins here. Or they come with like what ace bandages come with, the little stretchy tabs that have the little hooks on them. Scissors. These are trauma shears by the definition. These are just really rugged. They're good for cutting through clothes. You can cut through rope. just about anything you can possibly want to cut. These are pretty readily available on Amazon, any store, like CVS. These double as, craft shears if you really wanted to, or banded shears. So a lot of the kits you'll buy, or you can buy, they have banded shears and scissors. These kind of cover, this is like a one-stop shop for scissors. So these are what I carry, not this particular set. I carry some Leathermans, but I mean, all of our bags, first aid bags, have these in them. They're pretty handy and they're pretty universal. Sterile water. This is what we're talking about, wound cleaning solutions. So you don't have to buy sterile water. Like I said, you can buy distilled water. If you're a fan of hydrogen peroxide, there's a ton of other commercially readily available sprays and cleaners, just whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you want to put in your bag. This might take up a little more room than some of the other like little spray bottles of cleaners and stuff. So if room in your backpacking gear, your hiking gear, whatever is an issue, this might not be for you. But if you're just making a first aid kit, I mean, this is something to look into. Another important thing to put into your kit is eye shields. Eye injuries, it can be dust, it can be a stick, a finger. You never really know. They make oval eye pads and then they make eye shields. So the thing you want to remember with eye injuries is if you cover one eye, you cover both, because your eyes will mimic each other. So to keep people from looking around with an eye injury, you want to cover both eyes. It's kind of uncomfortable for the patient, but you're really helping and protecting them in the long run. I got a few more things here. Pardon me. It's sinus season in Ohio. So this is a cold compact or a cold compress or a cold pack. There's 100 names for them. These are good just in general. Bee stings, breaks, sprains. They're really great. They do have shelf lives because it is a chemical in there that's stored. Usually they're this style where there's an air bubble. There's an air bubble in here, and you pop the air bubble and you shake it real good, and then you'll feel it get instantly cold. There are other ones that have seams down the middle, and you kind of have to pop the seam in between them and get the liquid to the dry chemical and then shake them. And then the same thing for hot compresses. If you have a patient that's cold, you need to warm them up. Similar to the things you put in your little pockets, little hand warmers, similar, just on a larger scale, provide heat for a pretty decent amount of time. These usually last anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, and they get pretty warm. And with heat packs and cold packs, you never want to apply these directly to the skin. You always want to wrap them in a towel or a piece of cloth, because they can cause damage if you apply too much heat or too much cold to the skin. So you always want to make sure you put something in between the skin and the hot or cold pack. Nitro gloves, we have purple. A lot of people prefer like the black ones. The only thing I'll caution you on the black ones is if when you're dealing in blood, it's hard to see blood on black. So that's why we use purple, because if you get a little bit of blood on these from like a sting or a scrape or whatever, you can see the blood, so you know it's on there and you're not touching something else on accident or getting blood everywhere. So nitro gloves, nothing crazy fancy. These are just absorbent pads. These are a little thicker than 4x4s and 2x2s. They're called ABD pads or abdominal pads, trauma pads. There's a million names for them, but they're a little thicker. They're better for the big scrapes and cuts. So you don't go through 50 4x4s. You just open one of these, put some pressure on it, and you're good to go. And then tape. Oh, I do have one more thing after this. Tape. This is a 2-inch roll. They sell them down 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 2 inch, 4 inch. You probably don't need a 2-inch roll. This is just what I grabbed. If you cover cover a laceration or a scrape or whatever, you're going to need some tape to tape it down. So always have some tape with you. They make this like plastic style tape. It's really thick. It kind of has some elasticity to it, so it kind of stretches a little bit. It's really, really sticky. It's usually stuff doctors' offices use after you get like a shot or something, and it like is so painful to take off. It like pulls everything off your skin. Just be cautious with using this tape because some people are sensitive to the adhesive on the back, so they also make a paper tape. So I would keep this style and paper tape just for, maybe an allergy or something. And then the other thing I always recommend people having is a malleable splint. This one's called a Flexall. If you've been in the medical field, most people call these a SAM, S-A-M splint. What's great about these is, I'll open this for you. Let me find my scissors. These universal scissors I was talking about. What's great about these is they kind of form up to a lot of different things, because basically they are just a layer of foam with a very thin piece of metal in the middle. And you just roll this out, and then it forms to a lot of different things. So if you can see, I can bend it, and then it keeps that shape. Sorry, I'm working backwards on my camera. So it keeps that shape. So what's great about these is you can, if you got a wrist or hand injury, you could put somebody's hand like that and then roll this up around their forearm and then tape that in place. And now you just secured their forearm. It works for a leg. Because these are so long, if you don't need all this, you just need a little piece, you can take your scissors and just cut right through it. And now you don't need to use all this. You can throw that in your bag because these aren't sterile procedures. So you don't need to worry about if it's sterile or not because you're not inducing it into the bloodstream or anything. And now you have this little piece. So little arms, little legs, little feet, you've got a little piece to work with. So that kind of covers our first aid supplies. The other thing you can think about, and I would talk with the people you're with, and if you're still underage, talk with your parents, talk to your leaders. Some people like to keep like ibuprofen or sting kits, stuff that has chemicals in it. Just be aware people do have allergies, and then you should always be concerned with allergies. Before you give anybody a medication or anything like that, make sure you've covered the allergies. I just want to talk real quick before we get into some of the emergencies, some preparedness before you go out into the woods. It's always good to have, a GPS or a cell phone with you. You should have a flashlight with you, and then you should have a plan. If you go hiking with a large group or by yourself or in small pairs, the plan should be, you should know where you're trying to start, know where you're trying to end, have sort of a time frame. And then on top of that, let somebody know you're going and what time. You can do interval checking in and out. So if you miss a time mark that you haven't called or text or sent up a smoke signal, someone knows you're, to text you, call you. I mean, cell phones, everybody has one now. It's just almost everybody. I shouldn't say everybody. Almost everybody has one now. So, as long as someone has one, and then a GPS is never a bad thing because if you don't have cell service, at least you have a GPS. You can get coordinates to call for help and stuff like that. So moving on, let me just click on my slideshow that you can't see. So the first thing we're going to cover in medical emergencies and situation is heat emergencies. It's getting to that time of the year in the United States where we're, the temperature is getting ready to ramp up and we're going to start, needing to hydrate. If you know you're going out tomorrow to go hiking or to, backpack or whatever you're going to do, you always want to pre-hydrate 24 hours before. So the first thing you always want to do is obviously hydrate. And then when you're talking about heat emergencies, there's 3 classifications of heat emergencies, and it goes from not good to bad to serious. So the first one on the list is heat cramps. The name implies everything. It's literally just, you start getting cramps in your stomach, maybe your legs, your arms, your shoulders. You're sweating a lot because you're exerting a lot of energy. And as you sweat, you're losing electrolytes, which, affects your muscles and they start cramping up. Or if they don't cramp, you might just start getting like sore and weak. You might notice that if you've been to the gym and you work out and then you go to grab something on the way home, it's like, oh man, my arm's so heavy. It's the same difference. So heat cramps are kind of like the cautionary tale. If you start getting crampy, you need to stop what you're doing, drink some fluid, take take a 15, 20-minute break if you need to, remove yourself from the heat, find a nice piece of shade to sit under with a breeze, wet your rag, wipe your forehead, get the sweat off, and just relax for a minute. You're not in a bad place, but you don't want to get to a bad place. So after that is heat exhaustion. So heat exhaustion is like the mild. So if you go, not so bad to mild to serious, or bad to worse, if you will. Heat exhaustion is heavy sweating. The patient usually presents faint or dizzy or really weak. They usually have a sudden onset of a headache. Their skin might feel cool and moist to the touch, so they're not really hot, but they're not cold. It's just like a cool feeling, but they're really wet. And then if you feel for a pulse, it's generally you want to check a radial pulse, which is at your wrist. You feel for a pulse, and you'll notice it's really, really fast, but it's hard to feel for. These are the patients that you want to remove, or the people, or yourself. These are the people that you want to remove immediately from the situation. You need to find some shade. You need to get liquids in them like right now, because heat exhaustion to heat, the next stage, which is heat stroke, can happen very, very fast. You just don't want to be behind the curve on this. So leading into that, heat stroke is the worst thing that can happen. It's a very high temperature, usually 104 or above. You're literally baking your insides. You're going to have the intense headache. You're going to have nausea and vomiting. The person that you're talking to, maybe it's yourself, maybe it's someone else, they're going to have a change in mental status. So they might start acting confused, saying silly things that don't make sense, that's not normal to them. They're going to have a very rapid heart rate. They're going to be breathing really heavy, and then they're going to have flushed skin. Essentially, their body has sweat everything out, and a telltale sign of this is they stop sweating. So if you go from really, really sweaty and you're not changing anything to not sweating, you're in a bad place. Your body has essentially stopped compensating for the heat exchange to cool you down. And I don't know what's going on anymore. I can't do this anymore. We don't have any more liquid to sweat to make you cool down. Now we have a problem. Heat exhaustion is an emergency. Heat stroke is a bad emergency. That patient needs to get to a hospital. If you can walk with them to get them out, try to do that, but make sure you relax them first. Get some fluids into them. Try to get them cooled down first. This is where your cold packs are going to come into hand. You can put them under the armpits, on the nape of the neck. You can put it in their groin. You want to, obviously, it's a sensitive subject, removing clothes, but if they have extra clothing on that they normally don't need, take it down to their t-shirt. If they're wearing a scarf or, bandana, take those things off to help. Take their shoes off, expose their feet, expose their forearms. If you want to try this, when you have time, stand at your kitchen sink and turn the cold water on and let it run for about 30 seconds to get nice and cold. And then stick your forearm under the running water and see how cold you get. You'll get really cold really fast. And it's the same thing if you stuck a cold, wet rag on the back of your neck, you're going to get really cold really fast. So try to remove the excess clothing. You don't want them down in their underwear or anything like that unless they go unconscious, and that's a whole other thing. But hopefully you've gotten help by then, or you've gotten to help. So remove their socks, remove their shoes, remove a bandana, remove a hat, and just really try to cool them down and get help. So the next thing on my list, opposite of this, would be cold emergencies. This is where your heat packs will come in, and you should always dress for the weather. So in the summertime, you should wear non-restrictive, loose clothing. In the wintertime, you want layers and you want to bundle up. You want something to keep your feet dry. I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong one. You want something to keep your feet dry and, just to stay warm. So on the scale of things, as with heat, there are three things. There are three categories. So mild hypothermia is the shivering, the numbness. Your hands might start feeling numb, or your feet, the feeling of being cold, and then your body temperature decreases. So these are the two emergencies where your thermometers are going to come in really handy if you have them in your kit. because hypothermia is defined as anything less than 95 degrees to 86 degrees, and it's kind of a scale. So 95 down to 93 or 92 is one. 92 to 89 is bad, and then anything under 89 is it's really, really bad. It's really serious. So with mild hypothermia, you're going to have the shivering, the numbness, the feeling cold, and decreased body temperature. Moving on to the next step that's worse is moderate hypothermia. You're still going to have the shivering, the numbness, but now you might see a little bit of confusion and lack of coordination. You might notice someone stumbling, or if they're using a hiking stick, they start dropping this. These are the patients you want to get to a warm spot. And you want to warm up. If you have like an emergency blanket, like the little thin, like tinfoil looking blankets, you want to get them covered up. You want to remove them from the elements. If they have wet clothing on, you need to remove that wet clothing. If their gloves are saturated, you want to remove that. If their boots are soaked through and they've got wet socks on, you want to, if you've got extra socks, you want to remove that stuff, get them wrapped up in a blanket. And then moving on is severe hypothermia. This is the bad of the bad, just like heat stroke was. This is as bad as it gets. And these are serious things, so you always want to be cognizant of them, and always check on your buddy or check on your friend, or make sure they're checking on you too. This is when the body has given up and says, so let's rewind. Shivering, the reason you shiver is it's your body's attempt to make heat, because it's jolting your muscles and making you shiver, and that's your body's way of making heat. So when you get to severe hypothermia, your body's like, okay, I give up. You're not correcting this, or we're not correcting this. I can't do this anymore. I'm tired. So the shivering stops. The confusion is definitely there. You'll notice that their pulse is very, very slow. And then their breathing will be slow and shallow. So they're taking, real, it almost looks relaxing, but they're very short, shallow breaths. Sometimes they get a glassy stare because your body does a ton of crazy things when it gets cold. And one of the things it does is called shunting. So basically what it does is it's trying to keep your core vitals going, your organs going. So it's reducing the blood flow to your arms and your legs, and it's pushing everything into your core and trying to feed your brain to keep you alive. It's a survival mode. So they might get a glassy stare because they're just confused and their body's trying to compensate for these things. And then obviously the low body temperature. These are the patients that you want to warm up. You don't want to warm up too quickly. You don't want to throw them in a hot tub or a nice warm bath or a hot bath, because you can do nerve damage to the skin. So the moderate hypothermia to the severe hypothermia is when we have to start worrying about frostbite. There's no blood flow to the tissue, so the tissue is essentially dying because it's too cold. So if you dump hot water or put them in a really hot environment, you can actually cause nerve damage. So these are serious patients. If you haven't called 911 already, you need to call 911. If you haven't got to the car to get them to the hospital, these are the patients you really need to move on. So without going into crazy depth on that, we'll move on to wounds. Let me just check the chat real quick and make sure we're all still here, because I'm looking at the screen and not seeing myself. Great. We're all still here. All right. So moving on to medical emergencies, let's talk about wounds. There's a big initiative out. Sorry, I need to take a drink. There's a big initiative out, and I'm sure a lot of you in school, or anybody that's around school or has read, watched the news, it's Stop the Bleed. And Stop the Bleed has basically been everything you've been taught about bleeds, and it's just put a fancy title on it, and it's added a few things. So with any wound, let's go back to the heat emergencies real quick, because we had a question. How would we keep people warm, cool in the wilderness? Keeping them cold would be, or cooling them down would be your ice packs, and then moving them to shade. as soon as possible, and just letting them rest and letting their body catch up. Keeping them warm can be the harder of the two challenges, because if you're out in the middle of the woods, it's hard to remove somebody from that element immediately. If there's snow on the ground, especially if there's like snow on the ground. But generally, if you're at the point where you need to actively warm somebody, people should be going for help, or help should be on the way. But once you get these wet items on and get these warm, these dry items on, get the wet items off, get the dry items on if you can. Use an emergency blanket. The other thing you can do is you can huddle up in a group. As long as you don't have like 10 people fall out on you. If it's just a couple people that are having trouble, you can huddle up in a group and use your body heat to help heat them until help arrives. If you're in a spot where it's just easier to leave. You're hiking a 2-mile trail and it's faster for you to get out of the woods. Obviously, get out of the woods, get that person out of the woods to a car, turn on the heat, or back to your campsite, and get them around the fire until help can get there. So there's no definitively right answer. There's not something that's going to work 100% of the time that I can say you do steps A, B, and C every time, because every hike's different, every trip's different, every piece of scenery is different. So these are kind of things you have to be very diverse on, and you have to have a few options. So I hope that answers that question. There's another question: what is the response time between being in town versus wilderness? Generally, your wilderness responses can take longer, and it's sheer travel time. So if you're out in the Smokies, it could take you 20 to 30 minutes to get somebody to you, versus if you're hiking around, a camp in the city or a park in the city, where access is a lot easier. So terrain plays a lot into that. How far away from humanity you are. So there's a lot of variables at play. And when you're doing trip planning and stuff like that, these are all things you should take into account. Because you're not going to always need everything in your first aid kit or everything in your bag that you need. Every scenario is different. So I would just say, if you're in town hiking somewhere local that you've been to, the trails are half mile, 2 miles, fairly short trails or trips. The response time is going to be great. If you're going into the Rockies or the Smokies, or you're going out into real wilderness where you're 10, 15 miles off of any beaten path, expect a little longer delays, and that's really where your GPS or phone can come in handy. If you're using your phone for GPS coordinates, most people have Google Maps or Apple Maps. You can always drop a pin right where you're at and then scroll down a little bit once you drop that pin, and it'll give you your longitude and latitude. When you call 911, pretty much every 911 center in the nation uses some sort of GPS locating. And typically they do that when you call 911. But the problem with that is it uses 3 towers to call what we call triangulate. And there's a lot more to it. Sorry. Tori's texting me questions. And there's different levels of accuracy with that. Like, one accuracy could be like they pinged you within, 3 miles of this one tower, and another accuracy could say they're in 300 feet within that tower. So if you think of it as circles, if they say you're within 300 feet of tower A, 300 feet this way, 300 feet this way. So now you're getting into like circumference and then area of a circle. So, pi r squared, everybody knows that. So you got to think, if you can give your exact GPS coordinates, you're going to be way better off when you're calling for help. Definitive care, as far as what, Tori? So we'll move on, and she asked a question, and I'll just let her elaborate on that, and we'll just kind of move on to wounds. Most people have probably taken a CPR class. It all works the same. ABCs: airway, breathing, circulation, or CAB: circulation, airway, breathing. Anytime you have someone get hurt, no matter if you're at home or you're out in the middle of the woods, you do the same 3 steps. You always check that they're breathing, they have a good airway, and there's no bleeding. And you take care of those 3 the first thing. So if they've fallen and skinned up their knee, is it just a little bit of blood and you can kind of wipe it off, no big deal, or do they have a huge laceration because they caught a sharp rock and they're bleeding pretty good? So you're always going to want to take care of those 3 things first, and you're always going to want to use, make sure it's safe to do so. If they've fallen down a trail, can you get to them safely by yourself, or are you going to need help? But if you're rendering care, just remember your ABCs, and that'll get you through sustaining someone. Whether you have to wait 10 minutes for health or for a provider to show up or rescue to show up, or you have to wait 30 minutes. If you maintain those 3 things, if you stop bleeding, make sure they have a good airway, and make sure they're breathing, you can keep somebody alive for a long time and fairly healthy for a long time. So with wounds, it's always stop the bleed. And the first thing you want to do is apply direct pressure. And that's where I was talking about these like these abdominal pads or combi pads or whatever commercially you want to call them. They're just thick absorbent pads. And you can improvise. You can use, if you have one of those stretchy scarves that goes over your face, or you have some, you don't have your first aid kit and you've got an extra shirt on. Anything that's going to absorb the blood and it's going to hold pressure, you can literally do it with anything. They used to teach you apply direct pressure, and then you elevate it above the heart, and then you try to pressure point. They've really skipped all this, and it's because of the Stop the Bleed class that really brought this on. And it's not a bad idea to keep one in your first aid kit, but it's tourniquets. So what we teach most people is you apply direct pressure, and these are for serious bleeds. I'm talking like an arterial bleed that's like spurting, or big, thick, vascular system bleeds. Not, I just tore the skin on the top of my hand and it's just kind of oozing a little blood. Those aren't the bad ones. You're talking about the bright red blood that's really bleeding. It's hard to control. There's a lot of pressure behind it. Those are the ones you really need to stop as fast as you can. So it's direct pressure, and you can put a couple different bandages. You can stack these. So you never want to remove your bandage. And the reason is because the bandage is acting like the platelets in your blood. It's trying to clot. So as this fills up with blood, it's trying to clot. And if you remove that, any clotting factor you just had, you lost, because you've basically torn open the wound again. Blah, blah, blah. You've torn open the wound again. So you can stack these. So if it bleeds through this one, you can put another one on top and put direct pressure if it bleeds through that one. I would say if you try to stop it with a couple of these really thick bandages and it still keeps bleeding through, and it's an arterial bleed, like it's a really bad bleed, like they're losing a lot of blood, then that's, maybe, it's time to think about a tourniquet. I'm not going to advocate that you put a tourniquet on. That's something that you need to go into a better class for. But it's not something bad that's, to have in your kit, because, accidents happen, and we don't always know when an accident's going to happen. That's why it's called an accident. You didn't plan for somebody to get hurt, but in the event that something does happen, at least you're prepared. So moving forward, for minor scrapes or let's stay on the arterial stuff, like the heavy bleeding. Once you do get that stopped, you want to make sure you wrap that tight to keep that pressure on there. Generally, direct pressure will. Sorry. Just give me 1 second here. That's what we deal with some days. So anyway, you're going to want to use your rolled gauze or an ace bandage to secure that. That way you don't tear it back open and you don't bleed, or the person doesn't bleed anymore. So moving on to like smaller scrapes and stuff like that you cleaned up and stopped the bleed on, you want to make sure you clean it, because whatever cut them is probably really, really dirty and full of bacteria and just odds and ends stuff. So you want to clean it. You can use something as simple as because not everything that happens to you is going to happen out in the woods. Obviously, we're talking about, wilderness stuff. But, you could be 500 feet from camp and somebody trip and fall, and you can walk back to camp to take care of this. You can use mild soap and water, like a Dawn dish liquid or, something like that. Or you can use, the prepackaged distilled or sterile water. Hydrogen peroxide is where that would come in. Just clean up your wound. Make sure you get all the dirt out, rinse it. The term is copious, which means a lot or a large amount. Use copious amounts of, sterile water or soap and water. Pat it dry, put a clean bandage on it, tape it up, good to go. And I kind of led into dressing the wound. Just make sure you always dress it, because once you clean it, you don't want anything else getting in there. The last thing you want is to get an infection because you tripped and fell on a trail and skinned up your knee, and now it gets infected because you didn't clean it. And then once you're done taking care of your patient, make sure you wash your hands. You can get a little bit of blood on you or a little bit of anything and not notice it. Hopefully you're wearing your gloves, your personal protective equipment. I'm sure a lot of you have heard a lot about that lately. So make sure you're wearing your personal protective equipment. And then even when you take it off, wash your hands really good. Hand sanitizer, soap and water, say your ABCs, do all the good stuff to make sure that you're keeping yourself clean as well. Let's see. Breaks. We could spend all day talking about breaks and how to, bandage and sling and, splint. We're just going to cover, the general practice of things you should look for. So breaks there's two types of breaks. There's closed wound breaks, which is if I broke my arm and it just looked a little crooked, there's nothing through the skin, no bone through the skin or nothing sticking out. That's a closed fracture. That's what you're hoping for in fractures. Once a bone comes through the skin, it's called an open fracture or a compound fracture. Those are a little more serious because now you've introduced bacteria into the skin because you have an open wound. So what I recommend and what I would tell you is if you have somebody with a break, you probably should call 911 or send for help. If you're taking care of the patient, you want to check for a pulse. And if we call it a distal pulse. So if I broke my forearm here, the farthest away point that I can check a pulse is my wrist. So if I broke my arm here, I'd want to check for a pulse at the wrist. If I have a pulse, that's a good sign. Mentally note that you have a pulse. That's a great thing. That means you haven't included anything. The hand's still getting blood flow. Life is good. It still stinks that you broke your arm, but at least this part of your hand's not suffering from it. Note that you checked for a pulse and that you found a pulse and it's all good. If you don't have a pulse, don't panic. Just note that. And then you want to splint. You always want to splint in place. It used to be common practice that people would try to reduce fractures. And that's basically trying to put things in place. Don't do that. The SAM splint that I was showing you earlier, these are great for, sprained ankles, broken forearms, sprained wrist, broken hands. I mean, a number of things. Splint with these and then wrap it up. And then you can use your cold compress to put on top to help with swelling. And then if you carry ibuprofen or, Tylenol or anything like that, if you're allowed to have it, then, those are things you can look into. But definitely splint in place, check for your pulse, split in place. And then afterwards, check for a pulse again. I wish you could see this slide because I spent a lot of time on this. But the theory that you want to go with is do no harm, N-O harm, and then do no harm, K-N-O-W. So don't hurt them, but know what you could do to hurt them so you don't hurt them. So then, like I said, once you splint, check for a pulse, and then it's comfort measures as far as, the ibuprofens or the acetaminophen, the ice pack, or whatever to help keep the swelling down. If it's a forearm, you can always put it into their chest, and then you can use we'll come back to our bandages. I'll show you real quick about this bandage. Let me go to my camera so I make sure I get it all in here for you so I don't miss anything. So these triangular bandages are great. You open it up, you will notice that they are big square triangles. Sorry, I don't know why I said squares. So you will notice that they're big triangles. What you can do is you find the apex. So you find the peak of your triangle. And there's, there's a long end and then there's the short end. Just tie an overhand knot in that. Once you tie your knot, this now turns into a sling. And so if it's a forearm, you don't want them to have to support things. So if it's like a shoulder injury or an arm injury in general, the natural comfort for most people, and you'll see people that had surgery or shoulder surgeries, they always keep their arm like this, and they have like this big supportive thing and like these straps everywhere. You can essentially do that with this. So now this, and this is going to be hard to do to myself. So that knot is where your elbow goes. The other end goes over one shoulder. This goes over like this. Sorry, wrong side. Like this. And then you tie that. And if you can see that, I put the knot in my elbow, and I put this around one shoulder, around the other, and then I tie that. And now this is supporting all the weight of my arm. I don't have to hold my arm up. I can just let it relax. I can take the pressure off of it, the tension off of it, and it's going to make them feel better. And then, you find help, get them to the hospital so a doctor can take an x-ray and get it set back in place. So if you're on a trip, 30 minutes from help. Jeez. Explain. That's going to take us into when to move somebody and get them out of the woods versus when to sit there. It all depends on your patient. If your patient has hurt their shoulder or their arm or their wrist, and you can walk, they can still walk, they can still, ambulate wherever they need to go. I suggest that you start walking towards the trailhead that, you came in at or wherever you're closest to. So, the faster you can get out of the woods, the faster help. It's kind of the two trains, one coming from Chicago, one coming from LA at 400 miles an hour. Where are they going to meet? That's essentially what you want to do. Good deal, Tori. So it's where they're going to meet. So if you're walking this way and the emergency responders are walking this way, you're going to meet, and it's just going to take that much less time for you to get, the care you need. If it's a leg injury, they can't walk. If you're able to stay safely, then, stay and wait for help if you can. Obviously, inclement weather can, if it's really nasty cold out or really, really hot out and they're having other problems, you might want to, grab a couple sticks, tie your bandages around their leg to hold it in place, get a couple people under the shoulders and kind of let them hop out. There's other things you can do. If you have sleeping bags, you can take long sticks and put them down the sides of your sleeping bags and essentially make like one of those old military cots, you see in like football and soccer. You got one person on one end holding it this way, walking that way, and you got the other person holding it and walking behind them. You can make a makeshift cot. I mean, there's a million things you can do, and there's no 100% right answer. It's what you feel best for the person that you're attending to at the time. So like I said, if you can safely get them out without causing a lot of injuries, help them out of the woods, get them out of the woods, and it's going to help first responders, EMS, you're going to get them to definitive care. So if you can do that, do that. If you don't feel comfortable or you don't have the woman power or manpower, whatever you want to call it, if you don't have that to safely move somebody, then don't sit with them, maintain their ABCs, help keep them comfortable, until help can arrive. I mean, that's the best thing you can do sometimes. All right. So the next thing they wanted to talk about was creatures. So it really depends what type of the part of the country you're in, what kind of creatures you're going to come in contact with. Remember, it is nature. You're in their home. They're not in our home. So you want to pay attention. So know what things you can encounter before you go somewhere. This is part of the planning phase. But some pretty common things that you're going to encounter anywhere are ticks and snakes. I don't think there's a part of the country that doesn't have ticks or snakes. I swear they're everywhere. So ticks, there's some preventative measures you can do. You can wear, pants, long sleeve shirts, and always try to get your hair up and get some sort of bandana on it or a ball cap. They generally like to sit in your hairline, because it's nice and warm. It's thin flesh. It's very vascular. They can latch on and almost instantly get blood from you. So there's some things we can do to take care of that. Like I said, wear a bandana, pull your hair up, put a ball cap on. Wear long pants, especially if you're going through brush. A lot of foliage and heavy brush. If you do find a tick on yourself, get somebody to help you remove it, because when you pull a tick out, they can leave their head and that can get infected. So you want somebody to be able to see what they're doing. That's where the tweezers really come in handy. Other than splinters and stuff like that, they really are handy for ticks because they've got really small heads and ticks are really, really small. So you should do a buddy check after any time you come out of the woods. Have somebody go through your hair, and then when you're showering, bathing, or whatever, just check yourself, because obviously you can't see your head that well. So have a buddy check your hair, and then when you're doing your personal hygiene, you check yourself every time you come out of the woods, whether it's a densely populated woods or just light brush and fields. They're tiny, they're everywhere. Some seasons are worse. They carry diseases like Lyme disease, and they can cause infections. But anyway, getting back to removing them, there's commercially tested, devices out there that, you kind of put it on the tick and then you kind of twist it and it pulls the tick off. But if you just have a pair of tweezers, you want to pull the skin taut on their head, and then you come in with the tweezers as low as you can get to their skin and pinch it, and nice firm, don't jerk up, but a nice firm pressure, and slowly pull up. And what you're hoping for is that everything will come out at once. And then once you remove the tick, just roll it up in a paper towel and, squish it, put it in a baggie, a Ziploc baggie, and zip it, and then put it in your trash to take with you. Just don't throw it off in the woods because it'll just jump on somebody else. You don't want to smash them with your fingers because they're full of blood. You don't know what's in that blood. So roll them up in a paper towel, put them in a baggie, zip the baggie up, or squish them in the baggie to kill them. And then whoever takes it out of your hairline or wherever they had to take it from, make sure they wash with soap and water or some cleaner. Wash that, because that's a wound at that point. They've penetrated the skin. Make sure they wash and clean that and make sure nothing else is there, and then you should be good to go. Snakes. Just check, make sure there's no questions real quick. Snakes. So they're sneaky. The best thing you can do is leave them alone when you find them. Like I said, we're in their habitat. We're not there to cause issues to their environment or their homes. You wouldn't want somebody coming to your home and stomping all over your house with dirty feet and then picking you up and throwing you off the side of a trail. So leave the wildlife alone as much as possible. Take pictures if you want. Unless you can't walk around a snake, there's no real reason to mess with them. There's kind of a few things that you can, there's guides that identify snakes and, cell phone apps and all sorts of stuff. But just generally, to know if they're poisonous or not. The venomous snakes have the large, broad, diamond-shaped heads, I guess you would want to call it. They're real big heads, and they have really tiny necks. So their heads are like, this, but then they have just this little tiny neck off the back. They usually have pointed noses, and their eyes, their pupils are normally, they look like cat pupils. So they're elliptical. Instead of being a round pupil, they're more elliptical. And then they have these heat-sensing pits, usually just below their eye. Some of the more aggressive snakes are usually the less poisonous. They're not poisonous at all. It's just going to hurt. Usually, rattlesnakes, they warn you. They've got rattles on their tail, obviously. The other thing to look for is if you can see their tail, does the tail overlap like a chevron? Does it kind of do this? Or is it just round, almost looks like you stacked beads on top of each other? Usually the poisonous snakes look like they just have beads stacked on top of each other, or the non-poisonous kind of have like the overlapping tails. So that's just general rule of thumbs. Like I said, if you can avoid it, avoid it. If it's causing a problem and you can get a stick to, kind of help it along its way, that's fine. But the best thing you can do is avoid it at all costs. If someone does get bit by a snake, you treat the poisonous ones the same way as you would treat the non-poisonous ones, because you don't know for sure. Um, Poisonous snakes are usually indigenous to those areas, so hospitals know, what kind of snake that would be poisonous area. They have antivenoms and stuff like that. So the first thing you want to do is, whoever gets bit, if it's yourself, don't panic. You don't want to get your heart rate up, start pumping everything out. You don't want somebody to suck on it and pull the poison out. That's just movie magic. You cover the wound, you dress the wound, and then you find help, or call for help, or send something for help. But keep your patient calm. Getting them worked up is not helping them, and it's not helping you. It's just creating chaos. And through any of this, keeping your patient calm will do so much more than you could possibly believe. I've been doing this. I've been doing EMS. I've been a paramedic for a little over 10 years, and I've been doing EMS since I was 18. So I don't want to tell, but like 15, 16 years now, certified, and a few years before that as a cadet. And sometimes keeping your patient calm makes them feel better than any medication or treatment, because it's what we call psych first aid. Sometimes just talking people through a problem will help more than physically treating the problem. So leave the wilderness alone. And why I'm talking about wilderness, don't pick up turtles and move them 5 miles down the road. Don't mess with raccoons. Don't poke the bears. Don't try to catch squirrels and stuff like that. Let wilderness be. We're there in their habitat, and we're there for their beauty. They're not pets. We don't take these things home. We don't move them from their homes. I read somewhere that if you take a turtle, turtles roam the same 2 miles, 2 square miles or 1 square mile their entire life. And if you take them from that area, they spend the rest of their life, looking for their home. And personally, I think that'd be a horrible way to spend the rest of my life, looking for where I was. But, it is what it is. So leave the wildlife alone as much as possible. We've kind of really touched on the management of the sick or injured. Like I said, it's the ABCs. Those are the basic necessities of life. That's what keeps people alive. Keeps people healthy, keep them comfortable. If you have to stay with them and wait on help, don't panic. That's a huge thing. If you panic, you're taking care of somebody, and if I panic and I'm taking care of you, that's going to cause you undue stress. I'm going to make you panic. If you seem confident, like you know what you're doing, you're very assertive in your treatment and your help. There was a question about, let me finish this and we'll touch back on that. If I'm definitive in my care and I'm reassuring, that's going to help you calm down. And so just be sure of what you're doing. Even if you think you might be doing something not perfect, don't let your patient know that. Play, the smartest person in the room game. Like, you're 100% sure this is the right thing to do. Even if you're like, did I put the Band-Aid on this way, or do I splint it this way, or what was I supposed to do, this first or this last? I can't remember. Just be confident in yourself, and that's the best first aid you can ever render to anybody, is being confident in what you're doing, and just do it, and then make them feel comfortable. The stay and wait or load and go, like I said, there's a lot of criteria that really fall into, a lot of things play into, should we try to throw them on our back and get them out of here as fast as possible, or should we wait wait for help? It all depends on, what resources you have available. You're no good to anybody if it's you and a buddy, or you and, say, 4 other people, and you send 2 people for help, and then you realize, okay, we need to get out of here. If you get hurt, that's just one more person that has to be helped, and you're putting a strain on the system. So, if you can't do it safely to get them out of the woods, or you don't have enough people to get them out of the woods or to help, send for help. You're better off not hurting yourself than, 1 patient is easier to manage than 5 patients. So don't overdo it. Only do what you can. And, you can always practice these things. You can always, like I said, practice, making splints. You can always splint each other's arms. just be careful. Don't tie things too tight. That's why we check for pulses afterwards. We don't want to cut off circulation. Remember, do no harm, do no harm. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have for the slides that you could never see, which is very unfortunate. I'm kind of bummed about it because I made them look really pretty and I spent a lot of time. So now I'm going to open it up to questions. Tori's going to kind of feed me some questions, and after we answer the questions, we'll get to the homework section, and the homework is not as bad as it sounds. So the one question she texted me was questions about spider and scorpion bites. Well, I will tell you, you never have to worry about a scorpion bite because they don't bite you. They sting you with their little tails. They might pinch you, but that's not really a bite. That's a pinch. It's the same thing for any poisonous bite. You don't want your patient to panic. You don't want their heart rate going up, and you need to find help or get help there immediately. I don't want to like scare you. I don't want to, come off as, the end all be all, like it's life or death, but it can be life or death. I mean, this is serious stuff we're talking about. You want to get the patient to definitive care as fast as possible because the only thing that's going to help them is, an anti-venom for whatever it may be. You want to know, there's a lot of people that like spider bites. Your chances of getting bit by like a brown recluse or a black widow or something really, really poisonous is pretty slim, but I mean, it can happen. So spider bites, the neatest thing you can do is, because generally you don't have to find care for spider bites like right now. You're always going to have this like little red circle. Take a Sharpie or a pen and draw around that, draw around that. And then you can kind of gauge, how much the infection is coming, how bad the infection is getting, or if it's spreading, every so many hours, every so many minutes or whatever you decide. If, you drew a circle around the red area and then 20 minutes later, it's outside of the circle you drew, you've got an issue. You need to get medical care, and you should always get medical care. But, should you, I'll get to that in a second. So the scorpion, like I said, don't panic, cover the wound, dress the wound and get them to care. I mean, that's the best thing you can do. You don't have an ER in your back pocket, unless you have a doctor with you that carries around random antidotes and, antitoxins and stuff like that, antivenoms rather. Just get them to care, however you need to do it, whether you need to stay with them and keep them calm, or you're 5 minutes down the road, you're 3 minutes from your car and 5 minutes from a hospital, and you can just throw them in your car and get them to the hospital before you can call 911 and they come out and transport. You have to do what's best for the patient. Like I said, spider bites. Spider bites, just draw a circle around it, and then monitor your patient. You don't always have to go to the ER for those things. Sometimes it's, you think it's a spider bite, but it's really not. You can get those in your sleep, so just monitor the situation. I mean, if it's causing you to itch or hives, go get checked out. But if it's not bugging you, then don't worry about it. I mean, you're gonna know if it's a venomous spider. You're gonna know pretty quick. Your body's not gonna like it at all. You'll know if it's gonna be bad or not. So the question from Kelly, my lovely wife, she says, should you hold on to ticks if you remove them from someone? If so, how long? So you can, because there's this wonderful thing called Lyme disease. So a tick, by all data and research, a tick needs to be attached to you and withdrawing blood from you for 24 to 48 hours. It's like 24 hours before it can actually transfer the Lyme disease to you. So if you check yourself, after every hike or periodically and remove ticks, it shouldn't be a problem. You shouldn't have to worry about it. If you want to keep a tick, like I said, keep it in a Ziploc baggie. And if you get sick a few days later, you can go to the doctor and say, hey, I got bit by this tick. I pulled this tick off me a couple of days ago and now I'm feeling sick. They can test it for Lyme disease and they can test you for Lyme disease. You don't necessarily have to As long as you know you've been bit by a tick, and if you go to the doctor and say I was bit by a tick a few days, they'll know to test you for it. It's pretty evident that if you got bit by a tick and now you're sick, that you might have caught something, an infection or something. And it might not be Lyme disease. It might just be you didn't clean it good enough, or your buddy didn't clean it good enough, and you just got a small infection. Like I said, don't panic. You don't have to be scared. Things happen, accidents happen, and 99.99% of them we can fix. So don't panic. We'll help you. What's recommended for the top first aid items for camping? That's a lot to your discretion. We're going to post these slides so that way you can kind of see where I was going with some stuff, and you can kind of like recap yourself. But I listed some like basic first aid things. You can't prepare hiking. You can't literally prepare for every emergency. If you did, you'd have like 2 or 3 people that all they did was carry backpacks full of first aid supplies. So I would say, keep the Band-Aids with you, keep the, rolled gauze, keep the tape, keep the cleaning solutions, ice packs. I say they're basics, but it might not be basic to you. So let me just go back. I'll just read off my list of things that I would recommend that you always have in your first aid kit. And like I said, there's commercial kits out there that you can buy, and it has everything under the sun in it. They're like 150-piece kits and little boxes that you shove in your gear. But adhesive bandages, assorted adhesive bandages, assorted gauze, triangular bandages, scissors, tweezers, medical tape, gloves for your protection, and nitrile is what I recommend because some people still have latex allergies. Something to clean your wound, something to clean yourself after helping somebody with a wound, a thermometer. Those are some of the basic things. Heat compresses, cold compresses. Like I said, you literally cannot prepare for everything. So it's really to your discretion. Obviously, the farther out in the woods you go and the more difficult the terrain and the distance from, safety, so to speak, or your camp or first aid or a hospital or whatever, you might want to throw a couple extra things in there. But if everybody cares a little bit in their first aid kit, we can all help each other. All right, let me go back to here so I can see. All right, so part of this, I was told that your safety activity checkpoints has a list of recommended or stuff you should carry in your first aid kit. And I'm also being told that the step 2 is interviewing a firefighter EMT. You've got one here, so if you'd like to, do an interview, I'm more than happy to talk with you and, answer any questions. So throw up the questions, and we'll stay on here as long as we need to. We'll get this done. And while I'm waiting on questions, I'm going to give you your homework. And your homework is get online and find some online stories of wilderness rescues. There's also a lot of books out there on first aid in the wilderness and memoirs of people that have been rescued or done the rescuing. Talk to your local emergency personnel about their role in wilderness response. So where I live, we have Caesars Creek State Park. It's several thousand acres of state park. We have a very large lake in the middle of it. We have miles and miles of ravines and hills. We have a dam. We have the gorge. So it presents a lot of risks. But the risks we have aren't necessarily the same risks that are in your area or the frequent camping areas that you visit. So go to a local fire department. I would say probably not today because a lot of fire departments are closed out to the public. But these are definitely conversations you can have on the phone with them if you wanted to. So, talk to your local responders and see how they prepare for emergency rescue in the wilderness and what you can learn from them. And then there's also, you can take an official wilderness first aid class. you'd probably have to talk to like maybe your Department of Natural Resources or your Fish, Wildlife, and Game officers. I'm not sure what they call them in your area, but you can always talk to those people. There are literally professionals for every job out there. You just need to find them and then tap into their knowledge, and you know they'll help you any way they can. Fire departments love doing public education. That's one of the biggest things we can do to help protect our public and keep them safe. Is we educate what we learn, we give to you, and by you keeping yourself safe, that keeps us safe because we're not robots. We get hurt too, and we get tired as well. So if you help yourself, we can help you. GSWO, so Girl Scouts of Western Ohio, is going to offer this class next fall. So if you haven't already, like our Facebook page, and it's the Wilderness First Aid class. Like our Facebook page, because we send out a lot of notice and a lot of media to really help keep everybody in the loop of what's going on within our council. So follow this Facebook page, and then when that stuff comes around, they will definitely push that information out over social media. And then the other thing is stand by one here. Let me find my little sheet. We're doing a service Sunday. We're doing this tomorrow, and I'm presuming the next Sunday and the Sunday after. So every Sunday, we'll be doing Service Sunday. The first live event is at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then again at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You'll be able to find these live videos, similar like you had today, just different topics, different badges. We'll put the link, or we'll go live from our Facebook page. You folks can just hop in and join the discussion, ask questions, and learn some neat things, and get some progression on some of these badges and stuff. If you want to know more about our organization, which is Girl Scouts, you can check out the website. It's girlscouts.org/join. You can learn more about the Girl Scout movement. You can find ways to get involved. You can find a way to become a member or a volunteer. We have so many things out there for everybody to get involved and to help spread our movement. So the homework, Miss Andrea Weaver, was to read up on some stuff online. So find some memoirs or some firsthand accounts online. Maybe find a book about wilderness rescue and stuff like that, or call your local fire department and try to set up a class as far as, or a day and time that you can take your troops or yourself and go down and interview these people, because everywhere, no two places in the country are the same. So if you live in LA, the obstacles you have in your wilderness are not the same as they have in Tennessee. So find out what resources your departments have and what things your fire department or EMS departments can do to help you where you do succumb to an injury or need help. So see their level of preparedness, and then they can give you advice based on the areas you're in of what works and what doesn't work, and what threats you have as far as wilderness in your areas. So just talk to a real everyday hero. And it doesn't have to be a fire department. It can just be your local Department of Natural Resources. And that is your step 5, is exploring the real life examples of wilderness emergencies. Miss Bass, when you're helping someone who is hurt, should you keep them calm? Absolutely. That's your number one first aid, is keeping everybody calm, including yourself. It's very easy to panic when you see blood or see somebody hurt. It's very easy, but you have to, being the responder and being the professional, you need to stay calm, because by you being calm, you're helping them be calm. And then there's other things you can do other than just treating wounds. I mean, sometimes panic plays a lot into, exacerbating the injury, because people freak out easy, and I've done it. I'm sure you have at some point in your life. It's not hard to do. So talk them through some breathing exercises. If you notice they're starting to breathe heavy and fast because they're scared of their hurt, do the in through 4, hold for 4, out through 4. Just nice, calm, assertive, talk. You can talk anybody through a panic attack, or being anxious or excited. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. So nice, soothing voice. Be confident in your stuff. You're learning this stuff. Practice these skills. If you just want to bandage up your own arm, or have girls bandage each other's arms up so they feel confident. Just always rest assured that what you're doing is the best you can do, and know that you're doing the right thing. So career wise, where should we start? Um, Obviously, you're going to want to start with your emergency departments, talking to them. Your local emergency departments will be able to give you avenues and people to talk to. Um, you know, the fire and EMS service and rescue is kind of like a trade skill. There's some colleges that offer these programs, but in general, they're academies sponsored by the state or local fire departments. So, well, look at that. There's a whole list. Yeah, there's infinite amount of. It takes a village. It really does. You've seen in movies and on TV these rescues where people are coming in on helicopters and they're rappelling down the side of mountains and they're doing pickoffs and all these crazy things. But what you don't see is the person with the incident command system. All the incident command training. The fire chief, the battalion chief, the captains, lieutenants. You don't see them sitting off site coordinating all these efforts with, because some fire departments don't run EMS and some EMS departments don't run fire. So now you've got multiple agencies responding for this one issue, and they have to coordinate with each other. Well, then you've got, you've got emergency managers coming in. You've got police that, block off the area to keep traffic out for the fire department or the EMS department. So there's really a lot going on. It's not just because you're involved in a rescue doesn't mean you're actually the rescuer. There's a ton of things that go into all of this, and you're kind of seeing that right now in the United States with this COVID-19 thing. If you watch any of the presidential, the task force updates every day, they've got several doctors. They've got emergency managers. They've got doctors. They've got epidemiologists, which are doctors basically, but they specialize in infectious disease. They've got people that are good with numbers and budgets, and just people that keep track of supplies. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. It's not just 2 men in a truck coming out to save your butt. It's literally if they're coming out for one person, there's probably 30 or 40 people behind them that are doing supportive measures for all this stuff. So we'll give it a few more minutes for the questions. If you have any questions, I'm glad I didn't even know to see that you were able to join today. I hope the weather is nice in your area. It's still holding out here. We got a few sprinkles and a few cracks of thunder, but nothing too crazy. Reading on here, if you didn't read through the comments, REI Expert Advice also had a great article about first aid kits. So that's in there. 85 in Athens, Georgia. Georgia. Whew. It's I think it's only like in the 70s here, but it's kind of like the first humid day we really had. So we're gonna get some thunderstorms. 72 degrees here, and then we're looking at thunderstorms here in a few hours. So it's my time of year. I enjoy listening to a good thunderstorm and the nice cool breezes. Oh, it's so great. Miss Tanya Luckett. Tori's computer froze. She says, "Well, miss summer not going. Are you not going to attack because of all the things that are going on, or are you just not coming?" Oh, that's a bummer. Well, you know what? You're always free to call and you can swing in as long as I'm there. I don't mind people stopping by. Not right now, camps are closed. But when we go back to, hey, Tori, welcome back. When we go back to status quo and society as a whole, getting back to normal things, love to see everybody. And looking forward to this going away so we can open camps back up. It's Being a ranger, most everybody knows, but a lot of people are working from home right now. But being a ranger on camp with all that property that you don't see all these smiling faces, it's just crazy. What does the schooling look like for an EMT? Well, so it's really most states are under what they call the National Registry. Um, Deanna, I'll get to your question here in a second, but Miss Bree Weaver, most states work off what's called National Registry. It's a national organization that basically sets the amount of hours. Usually, you can do a class within like 6 weeks. It's like 140 to 160 hours, I think, of classroom time. They take it's just basically an advanced first aid class. I mean, you learn a lot of good skills and how to save lives. I mean, it's a very effective and very purposeful and very rewarding job. And the EMTs do a lot of things. Um, but like I said, it's usually 140 to 160 hours, usually less than $1,000 for the class. And then at the end of it, you have a cognitive skill, and then where you're actually doing um, skill testing. So there's like stations, and then you have a proctor that watches you to make sure you do the skills right. And there's like a check sheet they go off of, and then you have an actual test on a computer that you have to. It does this weird algorithm that basically says you got enough right in every category to be an EMT. But what I will tell you is if an EMT is something you're looking into, and it's the same with every career. Just because you get a certification doesn't mean you know everything, and it's something that especially medicine. It's always evolving, it's always adapting. There's always something new. So it's something that just because you get the certification, you don't stop learning. And in fact, what I tell new people is that certification is just a starting point, and you really don't know enough yet. You need to add on and layer on to everything you've learned now. You need to really emphasize and dig into those areas, because 140 hours isn't when you're talking about saving a life, or potentially saving a life or helping somebody on their worst possible moment in their worst possible day. 140 hours of training really isn't a lot. So there's a lot more out there to learn. Deanna, if you didn't see the comment about if you get a badge off this was step 1 through 4 of the Ambassador First Aid Badge. The homework is completing step 5 to earn the badge. So if you have the printout for what the badge entails, step 5 is your homework, which is interviewing and doing, looking for real life scenarios and stuff like that. So, hour and 23 minutes, 24 minutes now. So with that, like I said, if you enjoyed this, even if you didn't enjoy this, come back, because you might have a better teacher tomorrow. I can almost guarantee you that. But tomorrow we're doing Service Sunday, and it will be at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on this Facebook page. They'll be live. So I'm not sure what it is tomorrow. But the first one's at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The second one's at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if, like I said, if you want to know more information, girlscouts.org. And then you can /join if you want to join. There's a ton of different things that we use for support. Volunteers, troop leaders, the girls, obviously the membership, getting them involved. There's a ton of ways to get involved and get a Girl Scout troop or get active in Girl Scouts in your area. We are always looking for new volunteers and new help and new girls to push our movement forward, and that's to create girls of courage, character, and confidence. So with that being said, I don't see any other questions coming up. You are very welcome, Miss Mansfield. I appreciate you attending. I'm glad you found it informative. I try my best. We could literally spend 2 or 3 days on this and probably still never cover everything. So it's a lot of stuff to squeeze into an hour now, but I'm glad it helped somebody. So with that being said, you'll still be able to comment on this when it posts to the Facebook page and read through all the questions. And then you'll be able to probably watch this video again if you want. I hope everybody has a great day, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.